So today we will be taking a look at how to solve one-step equations. So the first thing that we are going to talk about are the inverse of each operation and what an inverse is. So the inverse of each operation undoes or cancels that action. So as you know, everything in math we need to be able to undo. So the inverse of an operation undoes or cancels the action that occurred or the operation that occurred. So inverses we will use, well, the opposite, inverses are opposites, just in case you've forgotten that. The inverse of or opposite of addition would be to subtract. So if I'm adding something, I can undo that by subtracting. And if I multiply, I can undo that by dividing or using division. Squaring a number. So when I square a number, I am taking it to the second power. So like in that case, it would be 25. To undo that, I find the square root. So the square root of 25 equals 5. When I am multiplying by a fraction, the way that I undo that, I could think of it as dividing by a fraction. But if you remember, when we divide by a fraction, we end up keep changing and we're flipping that, and that flip was called the reciprocal. And so we end up multiplying by the reciprocal of the fraction. So your goal is always to solve for the missing number, and that missing number is shown, or its place is held by a variable. So our steps are identify what is happening to the variable. Is something being added to it? Is something being subtracted from it? Is something being multiplied? Or is that variable being taken to times a certain number? Is it being divided? And once we've figured that out, we're going to use the inverse or opposite operation to undo that. And I always start with the answer. Once I've done that, I am able to solve for the variable and plug and chug. I'm going to plug the answer back in. To check to see if I'm correct. And we did this, we called it evaluating expressions, when we plugged a number in for the variable to see what we got in the end. So let's take a look at these down here. And we'll go through these nice and slowly, and I'll be able to show you what's happening there. We'll try to see if we can't leave our steps up there at the same time. So right now I have found my variable. My variable is x. What I also like to do is I like to draw a line through the equal sign. And what that tells me is this side has to be equal to this side. It's like a balance. And if I have too much weight on one side of the balance tips. Same thing if you've ever been in a boat, or if you've even been in your car and something's really heavy on one side, the car will actually lean. And we don't want our equation to lean. We want it to be balanced. And so I need to find something here for my x that when I add it to 51, it's going to equal 92. So I found that my variable, what's happening to it? Well, I'm adding 51. So the opposite of adding is subtraction. So I'm going to subtract, well, I was adding 51, so I'm going to subtract 51. And whatever I do to one side of that line or one side of the equal sign, I'm going to do to the other side. And you may think, Mrs. Williams, that seems kind of silly. Couldn't I just do that off to the side? Yes, you can. And we're starting out with these really simple equations, but the thing is we're going to get into these much more complex equations. And if we are not writing down these steps and we are not following them, we're going to get very lost in those more complex equations. And then all of your math from here on out is going to involve equations. So when you hit algebra, geometry, pre-calculus, all that, you have to be able to do this. And if you can't do this, you are going to struggle mightily and you're going to have to go back and relearn it. So why not learn it correctly the first time? A positive 51 and a negative 51, well, those cancel each other out. It's the whole reason we did it. So over here, I just have the x, and I'm going to bring my variable down here. There's my equal sign. So I'm figuring out what is x equal? What value is going to go in there? Well, I have 92 minus 51. So 2 minus 1 is 1. 9 minus 5 is 4. And I got that x equals 41. I can check to see if that answer is correct. I can go back up here to that original equation, and I can say that 41 plus 51 equals 92. And if I add those together, I get 92 equals 92. So that does indeed check out. That is the correct answer. And that's all I need to do to check my work to see if it is correct. I'm going to get some different colors here for checking in just a moment. That'll help us out. So our next one down here we have is negative 9 equals a minus 17. So I find my variable, and what is happening to it? Well, I'm subtracting something from it. I'm subtracting 17. So I'm going to draw my line through my equal sign. The opposite of subtraction is addition, and since I was subtracting 17, I'm going to add 17 because I want to cancel it out. Whatever I do to one side, I have to make sure that I do to the other side to keep my boat balanced. So my negative 17 and my positive 17 cancel each other out. All I have left over here is the a, and I'm just going to bring it straight down and make sure I don't lose it. Then I have negative 9 plus 17, which is the same thing as 17 minus 9, which gives me 8. So I think that a equals 8. So I'm going to go back and plug it in. I had negative 9 equals a minus 17, and I'm going to put my negative 8, I'm going to put my 8 right there. So negative 9 equals 8 minus 17. Well, 8 minus 17 is negative 9, and negative 9 does indeed equal negative 9. So my answer checks out. This next equation that we have here is 49 equals 14b. Well, there is my variable. I'm going to draw my line through my equal sign. My variable is being multiplied by 14. In other words, I have 14 of those b's. So I need to know what each b is equal to add up to get 49. So 14 times b, the opposite of multiplication is division. And we're going to start showing division by using a fraction, because you are going to see it this way for the rest of your math life. 14 over 14 gives me 1, and that's what I want to know. I want to know for 1b. Now, I don't have to write that 1, but I can. Now, 49 over 14, I need to do that division problem, and if I need to, I can use a calculator. So I put in the 49 first because it's the numerator, and I want to divide it by the denominator, which is 14, and I get 3.5. So I get b is equal to 3.5. When I go back through and I check that to see if it is indeed correct, my original equation was 49 equals 14 times b. So 49 equals 14 times 3.5. And if I multiply that by 14, I do indeed get 49 equals 49. So my answer checks out. that indeed is my correct answer there. My next problem down there is 12 equals f divided by negative 2. And it helps if you read it to yourself to hear like, oh, f divided by negative 2, a fraction is a division problem. So that reminds me. Well, there is my variable. It's being divided by negative 2. So how do I undo that? Well, I'm going to multiply by a negative 2 because the opposite of division is multiplication. Whatever I do to one side, I need to do to the other side. My negative 2's are going to cancel out with that cross cancellation. They both, if I divide them by negative 2, both of them equal 1. So I get little 1's there. So then all I have are, these are all 1, so I'm going to have an f over 1, which is the same thing as just f. On the other side, I have negative 2 times 12, which is negative 24. And I'm going to plug that back in there and check and see if this indeed is our correct answer. So I'm going to have 12 equals f divided by negative 2, which means that is 12 equals negative 24 divided by negative 2. And I do indeed get 12 equals 12, so that means my answer is correct. This next problem down here is one of those problems where the number is being squared, or in this case our variable is being squared. So there's our variable, and what's happening to it? It's being squared, and we said the opposite of squaring a number was to find its square root. So I'm going to take the square root, and that's that division sign with the little extra side to it. Whatever I do to one side, I need to do to the other side. Now the square root of x squared is just x. So I'm going to get x equals, and I need to do the square root of 44.89, and I'm going to do the square root of that, and I get 6.7, and that's that little square root button there. When I plug that back in, I get x squared equals 44.89. So if I put in the 6.7 and I square it, which means I multiply it by itself, I do indeed get 44.89 is equal to 44.89. So that is my answer. It checks out. Our last problem there, we are multiplying by a fraction. And if you remember from up above, we talked about when you multiply by a fraction, you have to divide by the fraction. And then we said, oh, wait a minute, but when we divide by a fraction, we actually end up multiplying by its reciprocal, or the flip of it, the inverse. So the flip of 5/7 is 7/5. If I do that multiplication, I get 35 over 35. Well, 35 over 35 is just equal to 1. I could also think of these as being cross-canceled out and all equaling 1s if I wanted to. So I get 1a, which is the same as just a. Whatever I do to this side, remember I have to do to this side, so I'm also going to multiply this side by 45/5. Any number is a fraction, put a 1 under it. My class knows that to the Beyonce tune. I am going to cross reduce here. I'm going to divide this by 5 and get 1, and the cross of it is 45 divided by 5 is 9. So these are now 1s on the bottom, and on the top I get 9 times 7, which is 63. 63 divided by 1 is just 63. When I go back over to check that, I get 5/7 a equals 45. So 5/7 of 63, does that equal 45? And when I do that, cross reducing here, I do indeed get 45 is equal to 45, and so my answer checks out. Oops, slid down there a little bit, didn't I? So my answer then checks out. And that is how we solve all the different kinds of one-step equations. You're going to be trying some on your own. So what I want you to do right now is I want you to pause this video. I want you to try these 6 problems on your own. You'll then be able to start it again and see the answers. And there you can see your answers here, the work and the steps going down. And here is where those answers have been checked. Let us know if you have any questions.